Hello and welcome to Filmi Ladies. We're Pitu and Beth, and we're very excited because on today's episode we have a wonderful filmy gentleman, the lovely Vikas Raheja, on whose podcast Let's Talk Melbourne both Beth and I have already been. I think Beth recorded the Feroz Khan episode in his director series, and I talked about Rajiv Rai, and we were so happy to be on his podcast, but now he gets to come on ours. So welcome, Vikas.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, especially because I really, really love and respect all the content that the two of you put on Filmi Ladies. And I've told you that in personally, I've told you that on my podcast. And now I get to tell you it on your own show. Congratulations. I think it's fabulous. And I love, love, love diversity in thought as well. So I think what you two capture is exactly that. And good on you. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yay, thank you. Now, apart from the fact that Beth, myself, and Vikas are incredibly wonderful and intellectual people with we're always shedding the greatest like pearls of wisdom. There's one other thing that Vikas and I have in common, apart from our obvious humility, which is that Vikas and I are both NRIs. So I'm from Mumbai, but I've lived in America for a really long time. And Vikas is originally from Hyderabad, and he has lived in Australia for a really long time. Beth is the resident on this episode.
R.
The
She's
honorary
the
NRI.
yeah, she's the R, and we are the NRIs. And so we thought it would be fun to do like an NRI episode, and that is why we thought Vikas would be perfect to come on this show. So NRI movies. It's a whole thing. I feel like we can maybe credit Yash Chopra with kicking it off with DDLJ, which came out in 1994. And then I feel like it's really Karan Johar who took that ball and just like ran with it, because he has done films, and I actually did my research. So he has done things like Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum in 2001. He did Kal Ho Na Ho in 2003. There's Hum Tum and Salam Namaste, which are 2004 and 2005. There's Kabhi Alvida Na Kehna 2006, Dostana in 2008, and then there's My Name is Khan in 2009. So that is just like Karan Johar truly being the successor to Yash Chopra,
Yes,
not
sure.
really Aditya Chopra being it. And I would say like the trailblazer NRI film really that kicked it off was, of course, Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge in 95. But then there was also Subhash Ghai's Pardes in 97, a movie I love only because Shah Rukh Khan looks impeccable and the songs are great. Otherwise, it's a corn fest, and I don't recommend it. So Vikas, as an NRI, tell us which movie you have picked for today, and then tell us what you think about this whole phenomenon of NRI movies. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Are you ambivalent about it?
I have come to, over a period of time, I've come to like it. And I like it mostly for nostalgia because, now that you live outside of a country for like, I've lived in Australia for like 20 years now. So I feel more love for those NRI cringy movies that when I saw as a kid growing up. But even before, I mean, you mentioned, but NRIs have been in Hindi cinema since like a very long time. So, even in Wo Kaun Thi, I believe one of the characters came from London. Trishul, Hema Mali studied MBA of all things outside, India. I think she was in London or Oxford, wherever. So Chandni, they go outside. So NRI has always been a part of, Hindi cinema, probably championed more so by Raj Kapoor and Yash Chopra. But of course, as you rightly pointed out, Karan Johar kind of championed it. My only reservation with NRI movies is I give you a perfect example for Salam Namaste. I live in Melbourne. Salam Namaste is shot completely in Melbourne. None of us are like those people in that movie.
What?
So
I'm
we
so
no, we
disappointed.
dress like that, fair enough. We do dress like I remember whatever Seth wore at the time, I wore that in my university days. But to get a job as an RJ in Melbourne at that point in time, no. But apart from that, I love it. I think it's fun. It's, you take it at face value. It captures the diaspora, happiness, anxiety, and challenges. So I quite appreciate it from that perspective. The movie that I have picked today is one of my all-time favorite movies, which is probably, I would say, the best Hindi movie, in my opinion, in the past 20-25 years, Dil Chahta Hai by Farhan Akhtar. And I love this movie with everything in me. Like I literally love this movie. We'll get into it, but yeah, that to answer your question, Dil Chahta Hai is my choice of NRI movie. Yeah.
And then the Dil Chahta Hai, the NRI portion, is that basically Amir's portion where I think he's in Australia, right?
That is correct. Amar's portion. He's in Australia. Preeti Zinta, she's in Australia, but it also has a um, omnipresent, like a NRI hangover in on throughout the movie. And there is, although this is supposed to be, this urban, affluent Mumbai boys, but there is so much NRI influence right from on screen and off screen. Like you've got the art director Susan Kaplan, she's an NRI. Zoya Akhtar, who worked with Meera Nair, was an casting director and executive producer on this movie. So this is the first movie that was shot on sync sound in Hindi cinema. I think Lagan was probably the first or second. These two were the only movies at the time that came in sync sound. So yeah, NRI on screen, yes, that's only the portion of Amir Khan and Preeti Zinta's track, but it does have a very strong NRI hangover or influence,
Mm.
in my opinion, anyway. But yeah.
I think the music also has a little bit of those like different
Absolutely. The
sounds
music,
coming in.
the
Okay.
sounds, yeah.
And then Beth, which was your movie?
I picked a movie that I'd never even heard of before I began looking for an NRI film that I hadn't seen yet, and it is Flavors by Raj and DK in 2003. Had either of you heard of this film?
Nope.
I have heard of it, but I have not watched it. Yes.
And it is on YouTube if anyone wants to watch it. But I just thought, oh, I mean, I love their stuff. I think probably we all do, right? So it's definitely people I would be interested to hear from. And because it's their first film, I was interested to see what of their later films I could see in this. And I I should have thought of this before now. I haven't thought about them as NRI, as makers of NRI
Mhm.
films, but so yeah, people I really like applied to a topic I don't associate with them was too intriguing to pass up.
Right. So what exactly is Flavors about? Because when you first told me that the movie you picked was Flavors, I was like, oh, like an ice cream shop. But I had never heard of this film. And then when I checked out the Wikipedia page, it sounded very intriguing. So what's the story?
One of those movies where there's several different strands of characters and then they overlap. I don't know the name for that, but it's a thing. So like Salam Namaste, not uh Salam,
Film
Salame
contact.
Ishq.
yeah, kind of like that.
Film.
Everybody is in the United States. I don't know where they're supposed to be. One of them is on the West Coast, and I think the others are on the East Coast, it says, but New York suburbs, I don't know. You see a cityscape at some point, but I didn't recognize it, so I don't know where they are. And it's many different people, some of whom know each other through work, some of whom are family, some of whom are friends, whatever. They're mostly 20 somethings, although there's two parents who come over from India to be at somebody's wedding. And the dad there was the only of these actors I've ever seen before. So this was a cast of, I don't want to call them nobodies because I don't know if that's true, but they are not anybody's I'd ever heard of.
Right.
A lot of them are Indian American or
Mm.
NRIs themselves. So that was pretty interesting. And I'll just say before I go too far, this film is rough. These are not good actors for the most part at all.
Oh, okay.
It's part of it's the time period, right? Like there's just kind of ways of doing things that seem very dated now. When you look
Mm.
like, oh yeah, that's right, the Christina Aguilera fashion hangover and stuff like that. But these are these are these are not polished people at this
Mm.
point. Maybe they're a lot better now. Some of them are not really acting anymore. However, the Rajan DK story, good time, interest is there. So I certainly don't regret having seen this film. And if any of our listeners have seen it, please talk to us in the comments because I'm really, really interested in this thing that, it escaped my notice completely until now.
So, how would you categorize this film? Like, is it supposed to be a comedy or like
It's
slice of
mostly, yeah, a
life?
gentle comedy, sort of, yeah,
Okay.
slice of life or comedy, but yeah, mostly comic, I would say.
Okay, so maybe like when it's dealing with like NRI issues, it's just doing it with like a very soft touch or with like
Yeah,
tongue in
and
cheek.
I was looking at a review of it in the Hindu from the time, and it says that there's not really much in here about, when you get culture fish out of water movies or culture clash movies, there's often a sort of current of trying to explain the one to the other and vice versa.
Mm.
I don't think it really has that this review is pointing out. Like it's just here are these people being these people, and that's kind of so yeah, slice of
Right.
life, that's kind of all there is to it. There's nothing,
Okay.
no lesson going on here, no sort of, and here is India for the people in the United States who meet them, or a
Right.
little bit of some of that kind of stuff, but very, very light on that kind of thing. So it's mostly
Okay.
about Indians who happen to be in the US and a few Indian Americans too, I think, based on what I understood of the backstories of like the 15 different people in this movie. So
You know, it's so funny, like when we were discussing in the group WhatsApp which movies each of us had picked. And sometimes when Beth and I are picking a film for like whatever episode topic we have, we'll pick from like completely different decades. Like she'll go down the 70s path and I'll go down the 90s path or something. And the three movies that all of us picked were literally made consecutively. So Dil Chahta Hai is 2001, Flavors I think is 2003, and mine is the in between the 2002 movie, which I picked, Bollywood Hollywood.
right.
And I had a very simple reason for picking it, which is I love Rahul Khanna and I also adore Lisa Ray. And I mean, it's not exactly torture for me to watch these two beautiful people in like a cute Deepa Mehta film.
I have
Okay.
never heard anyone say they adore Lisa Ray ever.
She's so adorable.
Yeah, I wouldn't say adore her, but I do think she's
Oh,
gorgeous. Like she's
She
stunning.
is.
But also, can we take a moment to discuss Rahul Khanna? Like the guy
time.
isn't aging. He looks the same. Like I need to know his diet plan, training, what supplements he's taking. So if Filmi Ladies has contacts with Rahul Khanna, please ask him and share that information with me.
No, he is stunning. And I was like posting on my Instagram where I was like, this is Rahul Khanna in 2002. He's a baby. He's so cute. He's adorable. And then I was like, this is Rahul Khanna today from his own private Instagram. And he's gorgeous and he's wonderful. But yeah, I was like, I'm going to get to watch 2 hours of candy, boohoo. This is going to be great. Also, it's like a cute movie. But the other reason I picked this movie is because I think it even though it's like a lighthearted, cute comedy and it's like fun and like a rom com, I really like the underlying theme of this film, which is Rahul Khanna is born and raised in Canada, or Canada, as we like to say. And his mom, Marshavi Chatterjee, who's hilarious, and his grandma, who's Deena Pathak, also hilarious, they want him to marry like an Indian girl. And he basically pays Lisa Ray, whom he assumes is an escort, and she says she's Spanish, or he assumes she's Spanish, but he's like, yeah, we can pass you off as like Indian, and he pays her to pretend to be his like girlfriend or fiance. And it really tackles this very interesting issue that a lot of NRI kids or like second generation, immigrant kids experience, which is they're born and raised in a completely different country and culture, like thousands of miles away from India. And their parents, who came over from India to give them that new and different life, are like, well, now that you're grown up, you must marry someone from the old country, or like even worse, like in DDLJ, from the pind or something like that, right? And it's like they'll accept a lot of things, but they will not accept you marrying outside of the culture. So I just liked that Bollywood Hollywood was a movie that was talking about that aspect, because DDLJ and Pardes also deal with it, but this is a movie that also talks about it, but not in like a very ham-fisted way, but like in a more lighthearted way, but it's still like a serious issue. What was the reason that you picked Dil Chahta Hai in terms of the issues that are central to NRIs, Vikas?
So I think for me, Dil Chahta Hai is any NRI. I'm obviously from coming from a lived experience, right? So anyone who leaves their home, their comfort zone, their culture, their food, their language, their people, and come to a foreign country, regardless of the reasons for them to move there is a sense of isolation. There's a sense of reflection. There is a sense of self-discovery, which Amar's character goes through. So I think that was relatable at an NRI level throughout and throughout, regardless of whether you were born in India or you were born outside India. It's always the reflection and discovery with your culture and with your surroundings and how you put those two together. I think that was captured really well. And I love the dynamic between him and Preeti Zinta's character. And bear in mind, it was so refreshing to see a relationship in Hindi cinema that felt like a real dating relationship. Although they were not technically dating, but the conversation seemed so real. I thought Preeti Zinta is just so wonderful in this movie. I I have in my mind, I have these alternate Filmfare Awards. So that year, I think Jaya Bachchan won for K3G for Best Supporting Actress with the Thali. And I was like, she's good. Don't get me wrong. I love Jaya. I love the Thali. Every time I go to India, I want my grandmother coming with me to the Thali. But Zita so good. I really hope she won this award. So there were that aspect of it. But I think what I really love about Dil Chahta Hai and other dialogues. I mean, I can go on from a technical aspect. There's so many things that I love, but the way the movie is written, the way the characters converse with each other, right from the time they sit, like there's a scene when the three boys are just sitting, slouching on their couch. That's exactly how I sat with my friends at that, in my 20s. And it was so vivid. It was literally watching your own self or a version of yourself or a version of your friends on screen. And I think that was quite fascinating. And some of the dialogues there, the way, like that famous when before that Koi Kahe Kehta Rahe, when Akshay Khanna is sort of sketching Preeti Zinta's and he goes, Kya hua, koi mar gaya kya? That's how we spoke at that time. Kya hua, when someone was really quiet or someone quiet in they lost in their thought. Or even when Preeti Zinta and Amir are having their first meeting in Sydney, and she goes, lekin, Amir tells her that, I fall in love, but I don't fall in love. And, then I decide not to fall in love. And she goes, lekin प्यार फैसले से नहीं किया जाता, बस हो जाता है. So the level of authenticity and the fidelity to the Hindi language conversation that city people had was so refreshing and new on screen, because till then, even in movies like K3G and DDLJ, the dialogues had a little heightened dramaticism in it. Like, Baoji, mujhe apni zindagi se ek hafta do, when Simran tells him, like, girl, get a life. Like, why you live in London, for crying out loud? Why are you asking Baoji for 1 week? So this movie kind of really captured a generation. And for my generation, I think this is, every generation has a movie. This is a movie that I think my generation loves and sort of grew up on and see it. Like I can literally see my friends in those, I can see myself and my friends in those three different roles. And coming back to the NRI point, this, trust me when I say this, and I may be a victim of this as well. A lot of people moved to Australia after watching Dil Chahta Hai because they were so enamored, enamored by Sydney, and we all thought we could meet Shalini. I unfortunately didn't meet anyone like Shalini in Australia. I'm still living in hope, but yeah. So this it kind of inspired people from my generation to come to Australia. Maybe not for those reasons, but it gave them a window, because till then, United States or UK was the only country that was like all Indians would flock to there. But then there was like, hey, hang on, we don't need to go there. We can sort of come to this other country, which is equally wonderful. So, yeah.
Nice. And then what are the NRI issues, like the main NRI issues that Favors talks about, Beth?
Quite a bit of job stuff that has to do with software, or at least code, which feels very, very of that time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I've had friends who work in software here, and there's a big company that has offices here in this town, and I think a third of the employees are from India. That's not even counting Indian Americans. Like they're from India. They come to Champaign, Illinois to work at this, at place, and they play cricket in the park behind the,
Right.
So software work, but more it's focused on what happens if you lose that job. And they I think there's like one mention of visas, but it's more about like finding another job and how do you present that. Do you hide whether you lost your job or not? So there's a character who gets fired and he hides this from his wife. And so he gets dressed every day and goes off and sits in a coffee shop, trying to find another job and stuff. So there's that kind of thing. There's the isolation of his wife, who all day is sitting in her, it's not quite a McMansion, but it's a mixed suburban cul-de-sac, terrible looking neighborhood that I would never touch with a 10-foot pole, but does also represent kind of an American dream of a sort of beige, safe type, right? And it's like the kind of house in America where, remember in Bride and Prejudice, Mr. Coley has a house kind of like this, like it's that kind of, beige suburban existence. So, she's sitting in her house all by herself every day, and you see her cleaning and like adjusting something on the coffee table ever so slightly. She's so bored. There's that. There's a character an Indian character who is going to marry a white American woman who's actually played by a Scottish actress, and her accent is like, what are you doing? And his parents come over for the wedding. So there's a little bit of that kind of culture clash. And she is, of course, tiny and thin and blonde and doesn't understand anything apparently about Indian culture. I'm like, you've been dating this guy. Like, how do you not know anything?
Right.
So there's a little bit of, his parents in particular getting to know her and what they think of her and like how they, and like, so there's a scene of his mother trying to get her to wear a sari at the wedding instead of her wedding dress that she's already picked out and everything. So there's some stuff like that. It's a little bit, yeah, so a little bit isolation, a little bit job and presentation of self through your work, through your position,
Mm.
and a little bit of culture clash stuff. But then more of it is also just um lost loves or almost loves and things like that that don't have anything necessarily to do with being an Indian in America. They're just things that these people are going through, I think. So
Right. So it's interesting that the movies that you and I picked, Beth, are focusing a little bit more on these like issues that NRIs deal with. Like if you are on an H-1B visa, for example, and you do lose your job, how quickly do you need to? I mean, I have several friends who don't have green cards yet. So it's kind of like, they have like 60 days in which they need to find a job where the company will be willing to sponsor them. And they have a house and they have children. And it's like super, super stressful. So it seems like your movie focuses on these kind of like real things. And then, also the H-1B thing, like the dependent visa thing, where until many years ago, I think if you were in America on a dependent visa, you couldn't get a job. But then I think they changed that. And I think now if you have a dependent visa, you can get at least like a part-time job or something. I'm not sure. I haven't kept up with it. But I've definitely heard of that as well, where it's kind of like you're on a dependence visa, unless you go to school, there's not much else you can do. And just the sort of isolation that causes. And it's really alarming when you go to India, for instance. Like even now in India, it's like if you're a girl of like marriageable age or whatever, the guys who are considered like a catch are the NRIs, right? And it's kind of, and there's a real hierarchy even with that, right? So if you go on like shadi.com or something, it's kind of like, okay, so if he's like a doctor or software engineer, he's top of the pile, right? But where is he? Okay, if he's in Silicon Valley, that's great. After Silicon Valley, there's, some other thing, and then some other thing, and then, oh, he's a software engineer in Bangalore. Okay. And then, oh, he's a software engineer, but it's like in Hoshiarpur, Punjab or something, right? So even within that, it's like you're ranking people. And the thing that always makes me worry about that stuff when I hear about it is, how are you making sure you're not getting gypped? Like, maybe this is just me, but it's kind of like you live in India, you don't know these people, they live abroad. How are you doing any of your like due diligence or checks and stuff? Like, they're saying on shadi.com that they're like a software engineer in Meta. Like, great, okay, but like, are they really? And that always makes me nervous. And that's one of the things that I like about movies like Pardes, even though it's a crummy movie. I like the fact that in a movie like Pardes, they talk about how, all that glitters is not gold. Just because the guy looks like he's like well settled in foreign doesn't mean he's a good guy. And like, how are you even doing that diligence? So that's like an interesting thing.
I have to interrupt just for a second because you said shadi.com, and I want you to know that the founder of shadi.com is in Flavors.
Like he's
Oh.
acting in it?
So that's what I'm saying.
Right? It's giving like passion project. It's giving every Saturday, let's meet in a friend's living room and like read our lines, which, no shame.
That's what happened. See,
But
people,
I think
Roger,
Raj and sorry, but go. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I don't know Raj and DK's bio well enough to know if they actually spent time in the US or wherever. This does look like the US where they filmed it. So yeah, for all I know, that's what that's what happened.
Actually, I was just going to say, I think Raj and DK are actually NRIs. They studied computer science in US and they had a passion for making movies. And I think this was one of the first forays or the experiments that they did till they moved to
you're
India.
right. Yeah, they emigrated to the US after their. Oh, and they worked on a film about a film called Shadi.com.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
But can I ask you a question, Pitu, on Pardes?
Yeah.
Now, Pardes, one of my one of my challenges with that movie is, right, Like, okay, it's a good movie and great, whatever, like performances are fine. But the reason Mahima Chaudhary's character kind of like thinks that this character is bad is because he smokes and drinks. And there's a scene where she goes, "Kya hai, ye hai tumhara dost, ye hai uski wife." I'm like, people in India smoke and drink more. So
Yeah.
I kind of grapple with that aspect of the character's reservations for for accepting this guy. And I was like, okay. But that could just be me. I don't know. Yeah.
No, Apurva Agnihotri's character is so awful in that movie.
Thank you. I forgot
Number
his
one,
name.
yeah,
Yeah.
because first of all, he manhandles her constantly. He's condescending and patronizing and horrible. He's such a lout. Like, I just want to punch him every time I see him. But also, his haircut is horrific, and nobody should have that haircut. It is second only in cinema history as being a bad haircut after Salman Khan's middle parting in Tere Naam. So
Oh
there's
my God.
Tere
Yeah.
Naam, and then there's Pardes, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, of all the reasons to hate Apurva Agnihotri, I think smoking is the least of that character's problems in that film.
Yeah.
But then again, it's Pardes, which is an incredibly
Yeah,
stupid
I mean,
movie.
it is fun in its own, it has its own merits for sure. Yes. But yeah.
But Beth, do not listen to Vikas. I have told Beth on many occasions not to watch Pardes, even though she's also a Shah Rukh fan. I'm like, don't do it, don't do it. Life is too short.
Hey, Beth recently watched a movie with Rekha and I forgot the name of the movie, but which she posted on Bluesky. She will survive birthdays if she survived that movie.
I've survived a lot.
She has actually. She's a true warrior.
Hey Beth, can I ask you a question? Like obviously Pitu and I, when we view NRI movies, by default our views are a bit skewed, right?
Mhm.
Like just because our biases kick in. But when you watch from like an outside looking inside,
Mhm.
what is your takeaway when you watch these NRI movies? Do you learn something?
Oh yeah.
Does it give insight into something that perhaps you didn't know with your interactions from,
Yeah,
say,
I think
as an
so
example?
because I have long been interested in, the sort of immigrant experience stories. I just think they're very compelling and fascinating. My own family has been in the US for a very long time, not indigenous person long time, but for European people a very long time. So I don't have these stories in my family. They're lost to time. And I think they're really, really interesting because it's one of the things that unites almost everybody in America, right? Like we all
Mhm.
have this, almost all of us have this in a quite significant way. But I just think it's fascinating, and I think they really highlight I mean, to use a very basic word, the diversity of what our culture is. Now I'm thinking
Mhm.
about American ones specifically, but yeah, I think they tell a lot, and I don't ever go in thinking they are accurate in a lot of ways, but they have emotional accuracy, if in a heightened way. They have, well, like, and you were saying some of them are very accurate, like those were your friends in Dil Chahta Hai.
Mhm.
So I think that, and they show anxieties, they show hopes and that kind of thing, even if cajoed into a level that is beyond what most people are thinking. And that's one thing I did really like about Flavors is because it touched on just these are regular people having romantic drama or work drama or whatever, because it's not unique to Indian immigrants to feel something is really hurt in your identity if you lose your job, right? Like there are
Yeah.
some
Mhm.
other layers to it, but some of that is deeply universal, I think, or at least widely applicable. So yeah, I find them really, really fascinating from a sort of anthropological
Mhm.
perspective in a way. And then every now and again, I just think the depictions of, I'll say America since that's what I know best, although I did live in Canada for a while too. Sometimes it's just funny to see how
Same.
the country is depicted in that same sort of exaggerated or wishful thinking, wish fulfillment sort of way.
Yeah. I know. I remember when so Beth knows this, Vikas, but you don't. So I grew up in Nigeria, right? I grew up literally in rural Nigeria, and it was a very, very simple existence. I mean, we had like one TV channel, which was local Nigerian TV, and we had BBC Africa. That was it. I did not like, to me, going to Mumbai on holidays was scary because I was like, this is a big city. Everything is scary. Everything is noisy. What is going on? Take me back to my farm. So it was like a very different existence for me. And as I was growing older in Nigeria, at one point, they started bringing American syndicated television programs to NTA. So they started bringing like Beverly Hills 90210, The Cosby Show, A Different World, like a few Fresh Prince of Bel Air. Like they started showing these shows, and I I just lapped them up. And because I was a kid and I had never been to America, I thought that was America. Like, I was like, okay, if you go to New York, if you go to Brooklyn, it's like they show in Cosby Show. And if you go to California, it's like Beverly Hills 90210 and then later Baywatch, which I had to watch Baywatch Chup Chup Ke because I wasn't allowed to watch it, but I would still watch it. So I was like, California is Baywatch and Beverly Hills 90210. And when I came to America, the first city I came to was actually Chicago. And I stayed in Chicago actually for 14 years. That's also when Beth and I became friends. And my first feeling was disappointment. Because I was like, first of all, why is there no ocean? There's just Lake Michigan. Yeah, sure, it's pretty, but where are the people in the red lifeguard costumes with the blonde hair? Where are the convertibles? Where are these things I was promised? Chicago is nothing like these places. So now, granted, I was very young. I was very sheltered. I did not grow up in an environment where I had been exposed to all of these things. But I think that is also common to a lot of NRIs or immigrants, where it's like you have a certain image in your head of what you're getting. Like for me, that image was what, Shannon Doherty and Jason Priestley experienced when they moved from Minnesota to like Beverly Hills. That's what I wanted. That is not what I got. And of course, I loved Chicago enough to stay there for a really long time. But there is that expectation that you have of what you're going to get and see and experience and what reality is. And at first it can be very disappointing and very disorienting. And then eventually you understand it better, and eventually you're fine and you assimilate and you're like, okay, that was Hollywood, that's not real life, and this is real life and it's fine, right? So do you feel that when you watch NRI movies, or is there any NRI movie that you watch that you think depicts those feelings of expectations versus reality and what that clash can be like? Because
Firstly, I'll say, I feel like you're my twin because when I was a kid, I watched 90210 and I actually used, so if you remember Jason Priestley, he used to wear this t-shirt and he used to fold the tip of the t-shirt. I used to do that as well. And I thought in my mind at the time that, when I'm going to go to college, this is how it's going to be. And you're right. No, it isn't. The bubble just went like quickly. So I was quite disappointed. So I relate with that.
Yeah.
It's 100%. In terms of depiction and reality, I think Salam Namaste I struggled with a lot because it actually came out at a time when I was living in Melbourne. So nothing in the movie seemed real to me except for the locations and probably the fashion. It was completely out of whack. Like even and one thing which I think the movies don't capture, especially Hindi movies don't capture, Salam Namaste, it was about these two a couple was sexually active and then she becomes pregnant and then the guy's reaction. You get that is true in the sense of any guy of a certain age would react like that. But this sort of coyness that they showed, the depicted sex of people outside, everyone's having sex, right? Like it's not all of this is that you don't talk about it, you don't tell your parents and you don't tell your friends, but everyone is getting laid, trust me. And if they're not, they're trying to. So I think that coyness of Indian showing, like even in DDLJ, I was like, I don't know if it's really that representative or accurate. But the other example, which I think from an NRI experience, is I think Imtiaz Ali is pretty good at capturing that angst or the isolation with Cocktail and Love Aajkal. I think especially more in Love Aajkal when Saif goes away and there's this whole song montage where he's very happy and then slowly he's getting exhausted and tired of his surroundings. In Cocktail, the guy's point of view of viewing a Veronica versus viewing, the girl within the salwar kurta, that to an extent is true, but it also is true that I know women like Veronica and I know that they are quite comfortable in that sort of space and they are NRIs, but they do feel like they are being judged when an Indian who comes there fresh out of boat, like he's just landed there and he's adjusting. So Imtiaz Ali is good in capturing those sorts of elements, even in Tamasha, when I think the fact that these two characters are in a strange place, they don't have any baggage or responsibilities. They're just being true to themselves and they're being kind of, real about it, that is also true. So he's one of the directors who I think captures the youth aspect of it. Like, yes, that's there. I think from Zoya Akhtar, she hits and misses for me from an NRI perspective. I think hers is more like a skewed, um, Indian affluent perspective. But even in Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara, the character of Leila, Katrina Kaif character, I've known girls like Leila who are like that. They're quite that was a real description of an NRI, so to speak, in my mind, because those people exist, and I kind of know them in real life. So, yeah, expectation versus reality. I think K3G, for the love of God, it's so far from reality, but it's fun. Like even Kavi Alvedana Keda I was watching, I'm like, I've been to New York. Nobody's houses are like that, and
Right.
especially editor of a verb of some magazine who lives in a townhouse in like Westchester, not happening. Like, unless you're Anna Winter, you're not living in that kind of house. Okay. And
Right.
especially if your husband is a failed unemployed coach who's having an affair behind your back, no way. And none of them are lighting those huge candle stands and those chandeliers in New York. So yeah, so you grapple with it, but of course, then if you, as you rightly said, Pitu, if you are in India and you're viewing this, you probably in your mind think this is how it is. But
Right.
unless you go there and see it, it's a whole different game altogether. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have either of you seen Donkey?
No.
I'm allergic to Raju Hirani, so I don't watch
Okay.
him.
Oh, I love
Sorry.
this. I love this. That's a whole other episode we can do.
So
I
Donkey
can't stand.
is not a movie that I'm saying is like so great or whatever, but I did enjoy it very much. And there's one scene in Donkey that was actually really, really harrowing, and it was very sad for me to watch. So the guy in it, the actor, I'm forgetting his name. Yeah, I can't remember his name right now, but he plays one of the illegal immigrants who've done donkey, and they've moved from Punjab to abroad to the UK. And he keeps sending home these photos of the house he lives in and his car and everything, and it's all fake. And his folks back home think, oh my God, look how well he's doing. And it's so inspiring to all the other kids in that pinned, because they're like, well, look, he went to the UK and look how much money he has. He has this house, he has this car, he's doing so well. And then when Shah Rukh actually also does donkey and goes over there and meets him, and he discovers that he's living in this basically like a shack, and he's living with 10 or 11 other men who are also illegal immigrants. They're all living in that shack. And every time they hear like a police car come in the neighborhood, they all have to grab their belongings and run away, like empty the shack, because the police might like enter without like with a warrant or whatever. And the job he's actually doing is, those street performers that paint themselves and they just
Yeah, yeah,
stand like a statue. That's what he's doing. So he basically just gets a few coins every day, and he's living in this absolutely dilapidated existence. And Shah Rukh screams at him and almost bashes him up, because he was like, look at all of these lies you've been peddling through your letters, and there's literally kids back in the pinned who want to be like you. And he bursts into tears and he says, what else am I supposed to do? I literally thought if I moved over here, I was going to become rich, I was going to become successful. Nobody has ever asked how he's going to become rich and successful, given that he can't speak a word of English and he also has no tradable skills. But that's a question for a different day. But he literally says to Shah Rukh, what am I supposed to do? I don't even have money to buy a ticket to go back to India. I can't tell my elderly parents the conditions in which I'm living. And so to make them feel better, I send them these pictures because I don't want them to worry about me. And I don't know when I'm going to see my parents next. And it's like that scene just was so sad for me. It was like, that's terrible. So for all of its flaws, I do think that that is one aspect that Donkey, I think, captured really well, which is about the expectations you have, what the reality is, and how sometimes you may want to lie, not because you are interested in peddling a lie or because you're trying to like flaunt something that doesn't exist, because you don't want to break the heart of people back home who are going to
not
be
an
so
expert.
worried for you, right? So that was really sad. And that there's some of that in Pardes as well, like when Mahima Chaudhary calls home, and even if she's been sobbing because Apurva Agnihotri is being a complete jackass to her. And when her parents are asking her, how are you doing? She wipes her tears and she puts on a brave smile. And she's like, I'm doing so great. I had such a wonderful time. I just went to a party. Meanwhile, 5 minutes ago, the audience saw her like weeping. So I think when the movies portray that aspect, I think it makes it more real because we've all been there. I've had health conditions in the past, like where I had to go to urgent care. My mom has absolutely no idea, because what am I going to do? Tell her that I went to urgent care? No, my friends know, my husband knows, they're taking care of me, but she has absolutely no idea because she's just going to worry. And so I think that's also something that I think NRIs and immigrants go through, where there is a level of secrecy we have, where to some extent we do paint a more positive picture only because we don't want our loved ones back home to worry about us. We reserve those truths for those family members and friends that are here, because they can help us and they can feel better about helping us, and we're getting their help. But there's not that feeling of helplessness that folks back home have. Beth, what are your thoughts?
I'm not sure I have any intelligent thoughts to share on this one, but my understanding is that urge and that habit to lie people at home is old. Like I believe that I remember in college, I took a class on American ethnic minority literature, and a lot of those stories, a lot of those novels were immigration stories. It's been going on since at least the 19th century, probably, right? So that's an age-old thing, I think, to project not only an untruth, but a very amp. So it's not like slightly, it's not like a reasonable lie, it's an excessive lie. Right? Which is an interesting pivot, especially. So does Dunky take place now, or is it set back in history a little bit?
It's set back about 20 or 30 years. It all gets very confusing because of Shah Rukh's de-aging.
Right. Because obviously with the internet, some of those lies get a lot harder to perpetuate now than they would have been 30 years ago or 100 years ago, obviously. But it's interesting to think that some people go for the Keijo version of reality when they could go for a Rajan DK level of reality, right? Like the people in this movie, a couple of them live in beige semi-McMansions, but some of them are crashing in somebody's guest house, and they sit on a gross couch and smoke all day, right? So like that, you could step up just mildly and still give an impression that you are okay. But the pressure to be successful is different than the hope of being okay. And those tensions are interesting.
Yeah. What else? I had prepared a bunch of questions for us.
Can I
Do you
offer,
Yeah, go ahead.
on this topic, can I just offer an adjacent view? I think one of my reservations with NRI movies is that most of them, if not all of them, they peddle to nationalism at some level. Either it's light nationalism or excessive nationalism. It's like people who are outside of India, are they really happy? Are they rooted in their culture? Do they really miss the country and the pani puri and the cricket? I'm like, I live here. I'm fine. I'm very happy. I don't know why they do that. I think they probably do that to sort of appease a certain sensibility of like, your hometown is your best town, and the nationalism, which now is becoming more jingoistic, unfortunately, by every year. So, but that's why there's the perfect example was that I love is Yash Chopra's Lamhe, because it's purely set on NRI lives, basically. Anil Viren, like I sometimes feel like I dress like Viren, and I watch old Hindi movies like Viren. I'm on road to become Viren at some point. But
You're not grumpy enough. Viren is grumpy in every
you
single
haven't
scene.
seen me
You
in
smile
personal
too
life.
much.
No, but I mean that was an absolute wonderful depiction of an NRI love story, I thought, in my mind. It was mature, it was reflective of the geography, the sensibility of the geography, that you could be of a certain age, but yeah, these relationship exists. These people have these lives, they have these challenges. There was not that हमारी संस्कृति का guilt in there was a little bit of that, but that was more not because of the culture, but because of his love for the Pooja's mother. It was that dynamic, but it was not ham-fisted in the sense that ये हमारी संस्कृति के गलत है या whatever the normal peddling that comes through. So Lambe is a perfect, beautiful example of an NRI love story. And one of the most fascinating things which I'll never get over Yash Chopra movies are how all the characters get their visa so easily. Like Pooja gets a ticket and her visa to London easily. Even Wahida Rehman's character in Dil To Pagal Hai, Akshay Kumar tells Madhuri, हम Germany जाएंगे, paper sign करके आ जाएंगे. Germany visa, she gets it on the day and she's flying and singing Dil To Pagal Hai. What kind of visas are these people on? I want to know. Like, who is the travel agent or the migration agent?
So I had this question when we rewatched Veer Zara for like some anniversary episode that we did. They keep crossing the border. It's so easy. They're like, 1 second they're in India, other second they're in Pakistan. I'm like, yeah, ho kya raha hai? And it's not just the hero and the heroine. Multiple people are
Multiple
crossing the
characters.
border with such ease. It's like me crossing the state border into like Oregon or something. And I'm like, bruh, this is not accurate.
Not
This
reality.
movie is
Exactly.
crazy. Yeah.
So that is far from reality too. Yeah. And even like Karishma Kapoor's character in Dil To Pagal, she goes, Papa, Mummy, London mein reh rahe. They're staying in London, I'm going. It's like, what visa are you on? Are you on OCI visa? Are you a citizen? What are your parents there as citizens? Like, what is going on? What's your passport like? Nisha, please tell me.
What about currency? Did you withdraw enough?
Exactly.
I'm thinking about a movie we've already talked about a little bit, which is Jhoom Bar Bar Jhoom, because they're all from Southall, right? In London.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They are NRIs, but they're like in Little India, in London.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of a subset of these, which I think is, I don't know if you would pick apart any differences if one like that versus some of the others. Because like the people in Kalonoho, for example, they don't live in Jackson Heights, right? Like they don't live in the Indian neighborhood in
Right.
the area. They're,
No.
and they are in a gloriously diverse setting of a street parade that has fire in it and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
kind of another version is like we will make the best possible multicultural America for this.
Right. The best block parties and all the food. Yeah, I don't, of all the NRI movies that I'm thinking of, I can't pinpoint a movie where it's set in like a very desi neighborhood, except for Jhoom Barabar Jhoom Southall.
See a few others, but I can't think of any. Where in Toronto is Bollywood Hollywood set? I don't remember.
They don't specify at any point. It's just Toronto, but I don't know the names of any of those towns or whatever. And it seems fairly diverse, just like if you look at their like neighbors and stuff like that. Yeah. I also feel like maybe if they did shoot in one of those neighborhoods, which is very desi, like I live in the Bay Area and there's a town about 45 minutes away from me called Fremont. And that's basically Little India. Everyone is Indian. You go to the library, everyone is Indian. Every store is Indian. They're like it's all Indian. I mean, they have masala chai in like the coffee shops over there, and they're like American coffee shops. They're not. It's not like a desi coffee shop. It's an American coffee shop, and they have filter coffee and they have masala chai. So you don't have to drink like a mocha or a cappuccino or anything. And there's like all these like Indian bridal shops. Whoever wants to buy like lehengas and stuff, everybody goes to like Fremont, and it's a whole thing. And I think even the a lot of the American politicians who are of Indian origin, many of them have like roots in like Fremont and Sunnyvale and towns like that. So one thing that really makes me very sad, and I have to give credit to the one and only Rajiv Rai, who Vikas and I adore, is that, all of these NRI movies, they always feature, number one is the UK, then it's the US, then it's Canada, and then it's Australia. Nobody ever makes a movie on the ginormous diaspora that we have in Africa. I mean,
Absolutely.
literally, the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, you guys, was an NRI from South Africa. And there are people like my husband's family is from Kenya. I'm from Nigeria. I have friends in like Tanzania. Do you remember Abbas from the blogging days, Beth? His family was from Tanzania as well. There's Uganda. Like there's so many Indian people in Africa. And there are like Gujaratis from like Kenya and Tanzania that I've met, that literally they have been in Africa for like 4 or 5 generations. They have never stepped foot in India. They speak Swahili, English, and Gujarati, and that's it. And they don't know any, but they start their day with like jalebi, fafda, and everything, and they eat dhokla and everything. They're vegetarian, and they're very Gujarati, but they're very African, and they have never gone to India, and they don't want to go to India, and it just makes me so sad that we have such a massive diaspora in Africa for so many generations, and nobody talks about it except for Rajiv Rai, who has set a few of his films in Kenya, and he later settled in Kenya as well.
Are there African-based filmmakers making some of these stories, like African Indian or Indian?
I think there is one on
African
Netflix
Indian.
that I saw. I can't remember the name, but I think there was a love story of between an Indian African and an African, South African in one of those Netflix movies. I can't remember the name, but it was not a good movie though.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, and I think a lot of that also plays into racism, right? Like, because it's not just like when people are like, oh, NRIs are desirable, NRIs in the West are desirable, NRIs in Africa are not desirable.
There's nothing aspirational about Africa.
It's not aspirational. And it's also like one thing that gets my goat is that whenever Bollywood films, or even Hollywood movies for that time, when for that matter, when they set a location and they'll say like, the Cotswolds, United Kingdom, or whatever, but they will never name an African country. It's never like Namibia, or it's never like Botswana. It's always Africa. I'm like, it is a gigantic continent, you guys. Come on, at least name the city, name the country.
See, that's why I blame the millennials, because they are the ones who perpetuate. I mean, we, not they. I'm a millennial.
I'm not a millennial.
Our
That's an Gen
X. Who perpetuate this fallacy and obsessiveness of the West and this Kejo Yash Choprification of movies. Like, funny you mentioned that there are actually a lot of movies there. So there's a movie Govinda did with N. Chandra called Shikari with Karisma Kapoor and Tabu, which was based in South Africa. Race, Abbas Mustan's Race, I believe, is South Africa. And there's a couple of other... Doom 2 was shot in Namibia. Famously, the bikini shot that Asha Basu wears is shot there. So we have gone there. But the problem is the people who write about, as I mentioned to you previously, everyone who discusses Hindi movies is so currently are millennials who are obsessed with DDLJ and obsessed with Yash Chopra. They forget to do research or forget to even think outside of the box to exactly have the conversations that you're having, Peter, to say, hey, it's not just the US and the UK. Hindi cinema has gone to South Africa. We have made movies there. There's so many movies like in the 90s, suddenly the movie was set in Mumbai or in some town and the actors were singing and dancing in a foreign location. Most of them were in South Africa. All of these Bilda movies and Karishma Kapoor movies and Judai, I think even she, Urmila's was, I don't know if she was from London, but there was some connection with that as well. The song was shot there or something happened. So it's there, the few, yes. But the people who write and talk about movies, it's their responsibility as well to not just talk about DDLJ 100,000 times and the Khans. Like the one more time, if I listen to someone to praise the Khans, I'm going to like turn them off. This is my new policy. It's like, I don't care about the Khans anymore. If they're aging at 60, respect your elders, give them their pension cards and set them away, retire them. Don't force them to come and shove them on our screens,
We have an entire Shah Rukh Khan episode playlist. You should just not watch any of those episodes, Vikas.
I like Shah Rukh Khan, but now is the time when, like if my father can retire 60 plus, why are these Khans still hanging around? Like, I don't get it.
So what are some NRI film stereotypes that you guys like or dislike? Starting with you, Vikas.
Some of the NRI stereotypes that I like or dislike. Firstly, what I dislike is no one outside of India is playing that banjo like Shah Rukh Khan is playing in DDLJ. Let me be very, very clear. Not every Indian is loving to have coffee and croissant. Some of us still want to eat, like a sandwich and poha in a house. We may not go outside and eat it. We want to eat idli dosa, and you get idli dosa everywhere now in the world if you care enough to hunt for them. And Karwa Chauth. Oh, actually, Karwa Chauth is, to be fair, true. Like, I live in Melbourne. They had Karwa Chauth. The women went crazy. I don't think they would have ever celebrated. They would have ever loved their husband back in India, how much they love their husband now here in Melbourne doing Karwa Chauth. So...
I have white acquaintances who are married to Indian men doing Karwa Chauth. And I'm like, stop it, you guys. Just stop it. I'm like, can everybody just stop?
One thing which I dislike, which is getting better now with time, is this coyness of depiction of relationship that people outside NRIs are more sexually active when they're dating. I think in India people are. I think films like Should They See Romance and those kind of Band Baja Barat showed that, and thank God, because till then it was all in India. No one has, no one really kisses. We just hold hands and they get married. It's like, not
Oh, there's
really.
flowers. Don't forget
Oh,
the
there's
flowers.
flowers, yeah.
That is how you get
So
a country of over 1 billion people.
exactly, there you go. See,
Getting that right.
science, yeah. So I think, yeah, I mean those would be the key ones, and somehow this jingoistic nationalism that is, which is I'm finding it more and more problematic, that people in NRI somehow love their country more and care more about their country than the Indians in India. No, but I also feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on here. I do, because I visit India so often,
Hmm.
and I kind of have a little bit acquainted from an Indian perspective in terms of movie views. I think the diaspora and the NRI outside who write and talk about cinemas have a very different sensibility when it comes to covering movies versus Indians. And perfect example I'll give you is Bhool Bhulaiya 3. I've everyone unanimously hated it outside India. They thought it was puerile, and even the people in the city in India hated it. But I'll give you the watchman in my building where my father lives in India. He loved it, and to him, he understood what it is to be a trans person. It didn't change his life or didn't give in him like an evolved point of view, but it made him a little bit sympathetic. So I think there's a disconnect between podcasters and reviewers outside India in the way they view Indian cinema versus the actual Indian audience to whom, say, a movie like Stree 2 or Bhul Bhulaiya 3 is talking to. That's not addressing necessarily a question from an NRI perspective in Hindi cinema, but I'm just saying from an NRI point of view.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if you had the similar thoughts or.
Mine is a little different only because, okay, so there's two groups that I encounter on a regular basis, right? Like I have a lot of Indian friends here in California who are born and raised in California. They have maybe gone to India like twice in their life. They don't want to go, they're not interested in going, and if they go, then they're interested in going and seeing the Taj Mahal and stuff. They're not really interested in hanging out with like extended family or whatever. They're very happy to be like in California, right? So the movies that they enjoy, much to my chagrin, are like, I have a friend who loves Hum Aapke Hain Kaun, Vivah, and Hum Saath Saath Hain. And I was like, girl, I can't. I can't. And she desperately wants to do movie night with me. And I'm like, not if we're going to watch a Suraj Bajata movie. I am sorry, we're not going to do that. So I do encounter a lot of Indians born and raised in the US who absolutely love those Bajatya and Karan Johar movies. And they think they're so beautiful and they love the outfits, and they all love Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum, which I also do, but for other
Oh,
reasons.
I love it.
Yeah, I do too, but like I don't love Viva and Hum Aapke Kaun. So they love those films, and they're really genuinely not interested in watching the better movies. Like if I try to get my friend to watch Masan, she's absolutely not going to watch it, right? If I try
Yeah.
to get her to watch Tumbad, she's not going to watch it. But if I tell her to watch Salam Namaste, sure, she will. So there's this whole category of like born and raised Californians, I know, Indians who want that glitz and glamour. And they're kind of like, if I wanted really good storytelling, and if I wanted a really good movie, and if I wanted really good acting, I'll just watch a Hollywood film. What do I need a Bollywood film for? So in their mind, it's very bifurcated. It's like, if I it's not like they don't know what good cinema is, or they don't know what a good movie is, but for them, that's what they're watching the English movies for,
Yeah.
right? So, or they're like, I'll just watch an English show, like I'll watch Adolescence, it's so great, why do I need to watch a Hindi film for that? So it's very weird. It's almost like they feel like Bollywood can't make movies like that, maybe, I don't know. So there's that category, and then there's the category that just is not interested. Like part of the reason I desperately wanted to start a podcast, and I messaged Beth and I was like, please start a podcast with me, is because I had no one to talk to, because my American friends here are not interested in Hindi films, and my Indian films are not interested in it either. So it's this weird combination of, I feel like there's a lot of stereotyping that goes on,
Yeah, yeah.
where they just feel like Bollywood is lesser than. And it's not coming from like a racist place. It's coming from a place of ignorance. And they just don't think that Bollywood has anything to offer them beyond glitz and glamour. So my perspective on that is a little bit different, perhaps, from yours. Beth, do you have any feelings about that?
Sort of. So my experience of sort of, coming into the Bollywood fandom world, at some point I realized that the people who most wanted to like invite me into conversations and stuff, for the most part, were people raised in India, where regardless of where they lived now.
Yeah.
Indian Americans, so Indian ancestry, born and raised in the United States, they were more skeptical or suspicious of my interest and things like that, which at the time I didn't understand at all. Subsequently, I have, like been bashed over the head with duh enough to have understood that I suspect that significantly comes, even if subconsciously, from a place of when I was growing up in the US, people made fun of me for what my parents watched or the food I ate or my name or whatever. How dare you now come and say you want to learn about this? I totally understand that now. Yeah, because I think and especially people kind of my age, so Gen X, right, who were raised with less access to global stuff, who were the children of the people in the United States who, when massive immigration reform happened in 1965 and a couple of years following in America, where for the first time large numbers of people who were not white but who were of a professional class were allowed into the US, right? So people born in the early 70s are the children of that first huge wave of Indian immigrants to the United States. And they were alone, right? Or like I come from a university town, but it's a small town of only 20,000 people, and we're not near the closest big city was 3 hours away. So there was no Indian grocery store where I grew up. There was an Asian grocery store, but that was Chinese, basically, right? We have a much different history in the United States. So like the Indian Americans I knew in my class, and there weren't very many of them, there were like 2 per grade in my high school or whatever, they had a very different experience of being into India in any way than even 10 years their younger siblings or people 10 years younger or whatever like that. So I can see why. And this is more an argument I think that I've read online about food in particular. Like, so you made fun of me for the lunches my parents packed for me growing up, and now you want to know what I think the authentic Indian restaurant is? Fuck off, right? And I can get that. So, and I think there was a little bit of that with movies, even if subconsciously. And not that anyone was ever like mean to me or anything, but I think that there was a little bit of a maybe unspoken suspicion of like, what is this white person doing, talking about and wanting to hear about our films, even if they had watched fewer of the films than I had.
Right.
Right. So, and that gets at some of what Pitu was saying. To Vikas,
like a little bit of prickliness.
A little bit. Yeah. Not everybody by any means, but the prickliness I encountered was much more from that group than people born and raised in India, whether or not they lived there still. To your original question, Pitu, about like things that we are annoying in NRI films, the one I always prickle at, probably not surprisingly, is when usually the West, but the foreign place is blamed for the evil influence, right?
Right.
That was in you all along. You're just away from home now, so you can express it or indulge it or experiment with it, right? And the most egregious example of that is, to me, About Chalain, which I really that movie's trash, if I remember correctly. Sorry, Rishi, we love you, but like, and that movie is and that's the last RK Studios film, I think, right? So like,
I think so.
An inglorious end to a glorious reputation. And I would be interested in rewatching that film now that I know more about the Indian immigration experience in the US and things like that. But that's one of those like the foreign is evil. And that's pretty tired, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
And that has been going on since our favorite Manoj Kumar came up with his Purab or Pashchim. When I saw that movie for the first time,
like, no.
Yeah, I was really little, and we had I think my dad had borrowed that video cassette from like grocery store uncle or something, and I loved Saira Banu because she was so pretty and she wore the nicest outfits and all her movies were fun. And so I was like, oh, it's Saira Banu, I'll watch this movie. I had no interest in Manoj Kumar, who would? And I'm watching this movie, and the whole movie is supposed to tell you how Saira Banu, as this, because it's Purab or Paschim, right? Like it's like East and West. And Manoj Kumar, of course, represents the East. And Saira Banu is like very shameless badam person. And she's wearing these like micro mini skirts. And she has an egregiously bad blonde wig. But it's Saira Banu. So you know what? She even pulls that polyester nonsense off. And she's wearing tiny, tiny things. And it was such a confusing movie to watch because everything about that film, the writing, the direction, the dialogues, everyone is telling me, a child, that everything that Saira Banu is doing is bad and she represents badness, and
Yeah.
Manoj Kumar represents everything good. But every time he came on screen, I would get annoyed and I'd be like, no, but I want to see the pretty blonde lady in the micro mini skirt. So whatever message that film was trying to shove down my throat, it was the exact opposite I was learning. So my takeaway from Purab or Paschim was, look like Sarah Banu. She's really cute and she's fun and she's bubbly and vivacious and she's having a good time. And Manoj Kumar is just like a drag.
Oh, he is a drag. And one of the interesting you say this because I now, if I look back at all the movies from the 60s till right up to the 90s, every time a female character who's set abroad, who's an NRI, she's smoking, she's drinking,
Yeah.
and she's always shown as this, very, she's quite modern. I'm like, that makes no sense. And today, that has sort of taken into she's a feminist. Oh, she's feminist, so she's smoking and drinking.
Right.
But she's just a person. Let her smoke, let her drink. Who cares?
Yeah. One of the few movies I think that actually turns that a little bit on its head, and I enjoy it for that, but also many other reasons, is An Evening in Paris, which I love that film because it's got Shami and Sharmila. And in that movie, Sharmila is literally wearing the tiniest, skimpiest, like cabaret outfits, and her character Deepa does all of the things that you talk about. But the movie at no point really moralizes and takes
Yeah.
a stand of she's good or bad or whatever. It's just like a really fun caper of a film. It's of course extremely unrealistic. I'm pretty sure life in Paris back then was not like that, but it's one of the few films that actually, despite being so old, is not as moralizing as, say, a Subhash Ghai film would be, or God forbid one of the Prajatya movies would be. So what was my next question? So this is what I think of as like the NRI film era. It's the 2000s. So there's Dil Chahta Hai 2001, K3G 2001, Kal Ho Na Ho 2003, Hum Tum 2004, Salam Namaste 2005, Kank 2006, Dostana 2008, My Name is Khan 2009. What was happening in the 2000s? Why is the 2000s so chock full of these NRI films? And then it's almost this sudden tapering off where we don't really, I mean, we'll get like a Befikre here or there, or oh, Beth is cringing because Beth has actually seen Befikre, which I have not.
Cinema.
But in the cinema, why, Beth?
Because it's here. And if there's an Indian movie in the theater, here I go.
So did you like it? Did you hate
No,
it?
I hated it.
I have never seen this movie, mostly because the trailer looked really bad. How terrible is it, Beth? Tell us.
I remember it as being quite terrible, but I haven't thought very much about it since I saw it. So cast is kind of fun, but
Yeah, I like Ranveer.
yeah. So maybe I should rewatch it at some point. They're in Paris, I believe, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with Beth on that. It's unwatchable. Like
Oh.
I remember watching it and I just wanted to basically punch someone after I finished it. But Ranveer is superb. Like that just what his performance just salvages every grievance that one can have with that movie. I thought he's so good in it. So good in it. Yeah.
I might
So
consider
sorry
watching
to
it for Ranveer then, because I do like him.
you should only for him. That's the only incentive to punish yourself to watch that movie is Ranveer. Otherwise, it's I don't know, be interesting to see how you sort of think. But to come back to your question, what was happening in the 2000s?
Yeah.
So this happened before that. So Subhash Ghai's Pardes and Yade, the most, if people remember Yade, which is another amazing
Yes.
nostalgia for NRI
Yadein
cinema.
yaad hai.
Yaad hai. So these movies, Pardes did moderately well in India, but Yaade bombed. Like it really bombed in India, but it was very successful outside of India. And Subhash Ghai in the press, I remember, made this. I was like maybe 15 when Yade came out, and he made this comment saying that I care about the NRI who's paying $15 for my ticket versus the 200 rupees person paying in India, or whatever, something to that extent, because he was so mad at everybody in India for not liking Yade. And then DDLJ became a big hit, which was again set and Dil To Pagal Hai, Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. They shot Mauritius was a frequent occurrence
Mm.
in many of the movies, Main Khiladi, Tu Anari, Pazikar. So what really happened was in the 2000s, if you notice, a lot of millennials moved out of India. There was this mass transition. I was one of them as well. We all kind of migrated either mostly to study abroad. Most of us got jobs in Silicon Valley. I have so many friends from school who work in San Francisco in IT. And so a lot of them happened. And these were the people who really kind of contributed to the revenue of these movies. So even if you
Mm.
watch movies like Kal Ho Na Ho, it was a hit, but it wasn't a gigantic box office smash in India. All of its revenue came from the NRI audiences. All of Karan Johar made his money from from this $20 paying or $15 paying NRI audiences. No one in India, apart from the cities, people were not flocking to watch these sort of movies. And if they did, it was mostly multiplex audience kind of a
Yeah.
thing. So it was a revenue model for the most part. And now, because suddenly everyone started making more desi movies like Badai Do and all of
Mm.
these,
The small town
Rajkumar,
movies
yeah,
with
the
Ayushmann
Ashutosh
Khurrana.
Khurrana. So now the NRI movie, that revenue model has not, it's working, but it's more like desi, like, people like Chava is doing well and, all of these other, I can't even remember what movies work, but I think it was a revenue model. That's why all of these movies were sort of Bollywood consistently
Yeah.
base their characters outside of India to appease to a certain audience or a sensibility.
I think also the rise of streaming, right? Like now,
Yeah.
if like whoever I know that lives in India, they're all caught up on, all the shows that we watch over here. Like everyone has Netflix, people have Prime Video, they get all of the same shows and movies. Like, when I was watching Game of Thrones, everyone in India was watching it. I'm
Yeah,
watching
yeah,
White Lotus right now. Everyone in India is watching White Lotus. So it's also kind of like if you were watching NRI films to get like a glimpse at what life is like in the West or something like that, you're kind of getting that from Hollywood now. I don't know in the 2000s how much people were able to access that. Like I had a Netflix account back when you got like the actual physical DVD in the mail, and you had like payment plans where you could only get, I think, like 2 DVDs at a time or something, and then until you sent it back and they got it, you couldn't get the next one. I mean, so there just wasn't as much access back then as there is now. And I think now, I also feel like a lot of Gen Z is no longer interested in moving abroad anymore, because they've like, honestly speaking, 2025, if I was a young person, would I be interested in moving to the US? Absolutely not. Like you couldn't pay me to move to the US today. But back then it was a great idea and I'm happy I did. I just no longer would do it, and I wouldn't recommend anyone super young to move here anymore. So I think some of that fascination with the West is also declining, and honestly, young people now in India know so much about the West than at least I did, right? Like when I came here, I knew very little, and it was completely informed by these like Hollywood fantasies I had, right? But young people today are not that stupid. They don't come here and then expect life to be like Baywatch and Beverly Hills 90210. That's a very Pitu specific thing.
They have access to research that you did not, right?
Yeah, they do too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's a good point. And
And
also,
those
I agree with you, Peter. I think what Shah Rukh and Chopra and Johar did very successfully was that they captured the aspirational aspects of the
Yeah.
middle class from the late 90s to the late 2000s, because they were like, you can be like us, you can wear clothes like us, you can be on locations like this, because if you go out, this is the kind of aspirational lifestyle you are afforded, like Polo Sport and all that, the
Mm.
brands that they used to wear, and all of Kareena Kapoor's, Roberto Cavalli, and Hrithik Roshan's clothes. But now you have Dior store in every city in India. So Gen Z is like,
Yeah.
why do we want to go there? Like we are
Right.
quite happy here, and the reason I think these NRI movies are not working as well also is because today the audiences are watching, film, as you said, shows on streaming. They're watching White Lotus, and they're like, this is horrible. Like, if you watch White Lotus, it doesn't give a good picture of any foreign location or any of these characters. It's not aspirational. It's kind of scary. So people are like, you know what? I'm just going to sit here and watch Chhawa and eat my samosa and not worry about going to like and settling in these White Lotus style lifestyle. So there is that Johar I think the success, especially Shah Rukh got, was he
Yeah.
really captured the anxiety and offered an alternative to the how you can spend your money or how you can make more money through by looking good and just doing what I'm doing in these foreign locations. I don't think that he can sell that anymore. That's why he's more doing Pathan now, where he's back to
Mm.
that jingoistic fervor, which is kind of there. Yeah.
Yeah. We haven't spoken, I mean, so far when we've talked about NRI films, we've talked about actual like Indian producers and directors like Yash Chopra and primarily Karan Johar and to some extent Subhash Ghai, right? But there's an entire subset of Indian origin filmmakers like Meera Nair, Deepa Mehta, who've made such amazing movies. I mean, The Namesake is a movie that Beth and I love
Oh,
that we have,
I
talked
love it
about.
too.
Yeah, we've done an episode on that. And then I love Mississippi Masala. I mean, first of all, it has Denzel Washington, like try to top that. Then there's Gurinder Chadda's Bend It Like Beckham, right? So good. Baji on the Beach, like such amazing films. Monsoon Wedding is, I think, the
Monsoon Wedding,
first
perfect. Yeah.
movie, I think the first Hindi movie that Beth, I mean, Hindi, English, whatever movie that Beth watched, that's amazing as well. And then Bollywood Hollywood is also a Deepa Mehta film. And I think it's made in combination with, like some Canadian film authority or whatever. So how do we feel about these filmmakers who are of Indian origin, but they are themselves like, immigrants or children of immigrants?
I think when they get it right, they get it really right. Like Deepa Mehta, sorry, not Deepa, Gurinder Chadda's Bend Like Beckham. I love it because it captured the Indian or the NRI of that particular milieu, and it done it very
Yeah.
successfully. But I think when she tried to do Bride and Prejudice, it was
Yeah.
kind of choppy. She didn't. She was trying to have it both ways, to like capture, and then also she wanted to I think when these people struggle of making a full Desi movie, I think that's when they
Mm.
sort of don't really come about. But when they're sticking to capturing the NRI perspective as an NRI, I think they're very successful in that. Like you rightly said, Deepa Mehta was so like Bollywood Hollywood is a fun movie, right? It may not be a great movie, but it's a good time.
Yeah.
And Monsoon Wedding again, good time. Like she won the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival. Like was crazy in itself that the fact that she won that. So I'm okay with that in the sense, but I grapple when they just kind of like Deepa Mehta made this movie with Preeti Zinta, which is
Heaven
Heaven
on
on
Earth. I was just thinking about that.
and I kind of was like, kind of mixed on that because I didn't know what she was trying to say. Again, when Meera Nair was trying to make a reluctant fundamentalist, again, I struggled with that movie so much. But when she makes a namesake, you're like, oh my God, this woman is a god. She's a goddess. Like, who in the right mind cannot love namesake? Like, it's
Such a good movie.
impossible. You cannot say you love cinema and have a problem with namesake because it's brilliant. Yeah.
It
Sorry,
should
you were
be
saying
like a test. It's like if you want to know if you'll get along with someone, like, if you'll be friends with them, or if you think that they could be like a good like partner for life, you should be like, okay, what is your opinion on the namesake? And if they say, it's kind of fine, you're like, wrong answer, bye.
But Peter, one thing which you mentioned was, and I agree with you, I think there's some NRIs who transition to India and make good, like Nagesh Kukunur is a perfect example,
Yes,
right?
love
He is
him.
an NRI.
Mm.
He's only made good movies, maybe one or two misses, but he's like Door. If you haven't watched Door, I
Yeah,
would
so good.
strongly recommend watch Nagesh Kukunur's Door. It's a beautiful movie. Hyderabad Blues that we spoke
I
about.
love.
Iqbal, he's such a good movie,
Yeah.
Iqbal. And Teen Diware, which for what it was trying to achieve, he was pretty good with that.
Yeah.
So there are people who can successfully do that. And yeah, I think we talk mostly about Meera Nair, Deepa Mehta, and Gurinder Chadda because they are like the, flag bearers. But they
Yeah.
have also made some very bad movies, I would like to just say, but also made very, very good movies too. Yeah.
I think one thing I did like about Heaven on Earth, it's I was actually thinking about reviewing it when we get to Preeti Zinta in our Superstar series, because it's such an interesting film, and not a lot of people have seen it. And I agree, it's like it's not perfect, but it does talk about a very pressing issue in the NRI community, which is the issue of domestic violence,
Domestic
and
violence,
it's the
yeah.
issue of abuse and almost this predatorial thing that goes on, where a lot of NRI men are interested in marrying women from like a smaller town or like a pind, because they're not going to be able to do their due diligence, and then they can be trapped in this horrible marriage and relationship where they have absolutely no access to get out of it, right? So Heaven on
Yeah.
Earth, I think, did a good job with that. And then there's a movie I really like. It's a hard watch, but it's really good, and I think Aishwarya Rai fans should see it, and it's called Provoked. I don't know if you
Yeah.
guys have seen it. It's by Jag
I've seen it.
Mundra, who is a person with very questionable, filmography. But Provoked is really good, and Naveen Andrews in that movie is
He's
just
so good.
so horrible. Like, he's good, but like his
As
character
a
is so
performance, he's so
horrible.
good.
Yeah, and that's also a movie that tackles the subject of like domestic violence and abuse. And Provoked, I believe, was actually based on a real life story that
Wow.
happened. Like, it was an actual Indian woman who had had enough, and she essentially killed her husband, and then it was like a self-defense thing. So yeah, I mean, I think when they really set it in that era, in that milieu, in that zeitgeist, they get it perfectly right. But when they try to bring these Bollywood elements into it, like in Pride and Prejudice,
Exactly.
it
Yeah.
gets a little hokey and weird. I think Bollywood Hollywood does it fairly well. Like in Bollywood Hollywood, Lisa Ray will like suddenly burst into a song, and then there's that adorable romantic number, Rang Rang Mere Rang Rang
Rangde,
Me.
Rangde, Rangde.
I love that song so much. So when they do that, they get it right. I think 1947 Earth is also such an amazing film.
Oh,
Um,
and what a performance by
so
Amir Khan.
raw, yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
when they're doing it in that specific era, when they're picking that era, it's great. Like Mississippi Masala, great. But when they try to combine it, it starts getting a little bit tricky, and sometimes it can almost seem as if like Bollywood or Bollywood traditions are sort of being mocked, which again goes back to that whole thing about like second generation immigrants kind of like looking down upon Bollywood and just being like, ew, why would you watch that, Beth, do you have thoughts on these filmmakers?
I'm not as well versed, so nothing intelligent to add about this, I don't think. But I can imagine it's very complicated to try to make a film that speaks to your own experience in a way, but then is drawing from other, another cinema tradition that is maybe not what you most naturally is not most naturally how you speak,
Right.
So I can kind of see, Bride and Prejudice is formative in my own film watching world, but yeah, highly, highly messy film that doesn't really
Mm-hmm.
any of its fronts, I don't think, but you can see why she tried, and you
Right.
can see why it seemed like a good idea, and then it just didn't. But maybe it could have, but it didn't.
Right.
Whereas
Yeah.
something like Beckham is much more. I mean, I shouldn't say what is authentic to Gurinder Chadha, right? But like it feels more authentic. It
Yeah.
comes across as an artwork much better.
Mm-hmm. It just feels a lot more earnest and genuine. It doesn't feel like it's trying too hard. It just feels very like lived in, I think. Like there's even in Bollywood, Hollywood, there's that sense of genuineness where there's a scene where there's a party and there's all these aunties, right, at a Sangeet. And one of the aunties, like, Indians in India, they are very much in ecstasy nowadays. And then the other person is like, they're very happy. She said, no, they're taking drugs. They're on ecstasy. And they're all like, and I was like, okay, Auntie G, please be quiet and just dance. We haven't talked about probably, I think of all the NRI filmmakers, probably the most famous one would be the Merchant Ivory duo. It would be Ismail Merchant,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And we love him. And he typically, I mean, he was the producer part of that partnership. And I know Beth loves Merchant Ivory films, as do I. What do you think about the way that I feel like they do a really good job of, like when you see The Householder, I recently rewatched In Custody / Muhafiz. I think they do a really good job of like depicting India and Indians. Right.
The Merchant Ivory movies that I have seen are the ones which they have done purely based in England. So I love
Hmm.
Remains of the Day, Howard's End.
Yes.
Those were the kind of movies, Room with a View. So they
Hmm.
were really, really good in that. But again, I struggled when they tried to do, movies which had that Indian kind of thing, and which is fair enough because they're coming in from a very English lens.
Right.
So I love their Hollywood movies, but I have to admit I haven't watched much of their other work.
Mhm.
That perspective, yeah.
I think you might. I think you would enjoy The Householder, especially if you love Shashi Kapoor. He's so darling in it, and it has Leela Naidu. It's a very sweet movie. It's
Okay.
adorable. I recommend The Householder to anyone, even if I detect a tiny bit of interest in Shashi Kapoor. Like, watch
Oh,
it
I
for
love
Shashi.
Shashi.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And Shakespeare Walla is, kind of the flip. You have English people who have spent a lot of their lives in India,
Mm,
how they've, so you're seeing India through the eyes of a different kind of Indian in a way.
right.
Shashi, of course, is the born and bred and pulls some kind of interesting cultural snobbery from that direction and stuff. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
What did the Filmi Ladies feel of? I mean, this is an interesting one. Shekhar Kapoor, like he is not,
Oh
well,
yeah.
now he is an NRI in some ways because he's
Yeah.
worked so much in the West.
Yeah.
Do you think he's like the movies that he's made in Hollywood? What are your take on that? How do you feel about those movies? But not say Mr. India or like
I
Bang Queen.
mean, when I think of Shekhar Kapoor, I mostly just think of Masoom because I love that movie so much. And I think of Mr. India, which is so entertaining. It is so fun. But I just think of them as very Bollywood. And like, I just think of Shekhar Kapoor as being a very Bollywood director. I
Okay.
somehow don't, my brain does not classify him as like NRI anything. Just like even with Rajiv Rai, right? Like, I think of him as a Bollywood director, but I do know that he relocated to Kenya and he must have had
Kenya.
family ties in Kenya for
Yeah.
him to have shot so many scenes from like and to set Vishwatma partially in Kenya,
Only
right? But
fully on in Kenya.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I don't think of him necessarily as an NRI. It's a little
Speaking of Vishwatma,
amorphous.
did you ever go to the Bubbles disco?
No, I didn't because I was too little. So no one was taking me to any disco. But like I've been to Kenya, I think twice or thrice, mostly because my in-laws lived. Then also when I lived in Nigeria, because it's like a huge tourism country even within Africa, right? Like
Uh,
no African is coming to Nigeria for tourism, let's just say. But we would go to Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania. Like those are tourism countries for Africans. And I've been to like a lot of places in Kenya, but not Bubbles Disco. I didn't see Divya Bharti. Sorry. Okay. Does anyone have any parting thoughts before I ask you guys to name your absolute favorite NRI film?
Can I just give quick shout out to Dil Chahta Hai, given that that's the movie that I picked. I just want to say, Avant Contractor, the hairstylist, bless you. You changed the way men focused on their hair, including me. I would never even care about having a haircut, but after watching Dil Chahta Hai, we all went to regularly got our haircuts thanks to you, Avant Contractor. The costume designer Arjun Basin, every single styling of the clothes you picked for those three men, we all own them. So thank you, Arjun Basin. K. Ravichandran, the cinematographer, that was one of the beautifully shot movie. And I mean, Santosh Sivan gets all the credit, but Ravi Chandran cinematography in Dil
Yeah.
Chahta Hai is to die for. Like the shots and the
Yes.
lighting, the framing, brilliant. And
Just the
Farah Khan,
bubbles in Tanhai Tanhai. I
Tanhai, my
love
God,
those.
yeah,
So beautiful.
absolutely. And this is the Farah Khan that I love, where the dancers are moving more than the camera, because after, the Mehuna, the camera was moving more and the dancers are standing there only. But in Dil Chahta Hai, the camera is static. You can see the dancers doing their thing. Koi Kahe Kehta Rahe, like that song is
Yeah.
still the most coolest, stylish song that I've ever seen in Hindi cinema. And then lastly, the music, Shankar Ehsaan Roy,
So good.
always credited them. They actually, in the beginning of Jaane Kyun Log, they introduced the indigenous Australian music sounds,
Yeah.
which I will always be appreciative for. Javed Akhtar's lyrics. There's a song, there's a lyric where Preeti Zinta says to Amir Khan's character, "Pyar to khair sabhi karte hai, aap hi kyun mukarte hai," which was
Mhm.
so true to the character. Like, to have songs with lyrics that represent the character's personality and thought is no longer there. So I appreciated that aspect of it. And lastly, to Farhan Akhtar, thank you for making my all-time favorite movie. And it really made me appreciate my friends even more after that movie. And that realization that how important your friends are
Mm.
hit hard after watching that movie. The realization that how important it is to um, how do I put this? Is to respect a woman whom you're dating, her ability to have agency at every single level, and appreciate that if she's not exercising that agency, there are reasons for that. And this may be so, it's so simple and obvious, but you need to dig a bit deeper. I think those things came out for me through this movie. So I just want to say thank you, Farhan, and I love Dil Chahta Hai. Sorry, I went on and on about it, but I
No,
thought
that's okay.
for your listeners, if you haven't watched Dil Chahta Hai, please watch it. It's one of the best gifts you can give to yourself if you truly love Hindi cinema.
Does such a person exist? Like, do we?
I don't know if I've ever heard a word against that film, honestly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that also could be one of those like, you don't like it, you're out.
Yeah, yeah.
What is your favorite NRI movie, Beth? It doesn't have to be flavors.
It's not flavors, but I am glad to have seen it. Nothing is really leaping to mind, honestly. It's certainly nothing beyond what we've talked about. But I mean, is it Kaho Naho? I
Maybe.
don't know. It might be. Just because, although I completely agree with everything Vikas has just said, I've never thought about Dil Chahta Hai as an NRA movie until this conversation,
Yeah.
so I would need to let it simmer in. But yeah, I mean, as a movie, certainly an amazing film and certainly better than Kaho Naho in every way, right? So, but I think there's something about that goofy Pretty Woman song number in Kaho Naho that I just like. I really want someone to write a dissertation about it. It's got so much, and as an NRI artifact, it's fascinating. We have not mentioned my favorite NRA character, however.
Who is
Oh,
that?
yes.
Is Rekha, the mob villain in Hilarion Ka,
Khiladiyon Ka Khiladi, yes.
I forget her name, but that's a character.
Oh my God. I mean, Beth, bless you for bringing up Khiladiyon Ka Khiladi. That song where she's singing In the Night, No Control with Akshay Kumar. Oh my God.
When I
Even today, if you watch that song, I can't believe that she did it. I still can't get over the fact that she actually did it.
if we have listeners who have not seen that song, I'm just going to say to you, there's your life until you have seen that song, and then there's your life after you have seen that song. And there's a brief period of during where you're not sure exactly what's going on in the entire world. So like it is a cinema life-changing event. I'm not exaggerating because nothing we can say will prepare you for the fact that this
Correct.
song was made when it was made with the people it was made with, like nothing will.
Yeah.
But I love that mob boss lady. I think she's amazing.
I
You know,
saw
fun
that.
trivia fact, when that song was shot, Akshay Kumar and Raveena Tandon were dating, and apparently Raveena Tandon accused Akshay Kumar of having an affair with Rekha, and Rekha gave the best all-time defense. She goes, Akshay is pure as the river Ganga. I haven't even touched him. I mean, this
Yeah,
was
she
a
only
time.
showered with him in the song.
Yeah, but yeah, she did. But this was a time there were unhinged comments used to come in film magazines, unfiltered, unmedia trained ones, and that was a different era altogether. I shouldn't be reading those magazines at 15, but that was a
Oh,
different
I
place.
read them too. They were so salacious. I loved them. I like lapped up all the gossip, but the headlines used to be so unhinged actually. Um,
Yeah.
so I've seen this movie because I went through a whole Khiladi phase when Akshay was at like the peak of his male beauty. I no longer have an Akshay Kumar phase, just FYI. But the most unhinged time and place for me to have seen this extremely unhinged song was a few years ago when we had gone to Niagara Falls. And Niagara Falls, that area has like a lot of dhabas, and they're run by these Sardar uncles, and they're very authentic. And we were at this dhaba in the morning. It was like 8:30 in the morning, and we went there for breakfast, and I'd ordered like aloo paratha. So I'm hungry, I'm waiting. They give you this big thali with like a big aloo paratha and dahi and pickle, and it's amazing, and like a little bit of rajma or something. And they had like a TV in the corner, and the TV was showing like some sort of live telecast of like Gurbani. So it was showing like, like stuff from the Golden Temple. And it was very like, sattvic, spiritual mahal. And I'm eating my paratha. It was great. And then I don't know what happened. Like, did someone like just come into the shop and they were like, this is too sattvic. We got to change this. And something changed and they put on a video DVD of like Rekha's greatest hits or something, okay? And the first song on that DVD was At Night No Control. So 8:30 in the morning, I'm eating my paratha. My 12-year-old niece is in front of me, and we're both like, what the hell just happened? We went from Gurbani to Rekha and Akshay Kumar like writhing in soap suds. So yeah, it's, that whole Niagara Falls trip is like, emblazoned in my brain, unfortunately.
Before and after.
Before and after. The Pitu that staggered out of the dhaba was not the Pitu that walked in, and neither was my 12-year-old niece.
Thanks.
People both changed. Yeah, at one point, my brother-in-law was like, don't look at the TV. Look at your paratha. Eat your paratha. I think if I had to pick my favorite NRI movie, I would probably pick The Namesake, just because it's so darling. It has Irfan, it has Tabu. It's probably my favorite love story that's been shown on Hindi cinema. I love the love between Ashok and Ashima Ganguly. I love that scene when I think they're at the Taj Mahal, and Ashima says to Ashok, she says, look at this thing that this king built for his wife. And he's like, middle class husbands can't build this for their wife, but it doesn't mean they love them any less. And it's so sweet. And then there's another scene where they're together, and Irfan says to Tabu, he says, say, I love you. And Tabu says, what? Like the Americans say? And then she just walks away. It's just, that movie just makes me smile the entire time. And it's just so sweet. It's such a good representation of like academia. It's such a good representation of that generation that Beth was talking about, that older generation that came, and like their first winter, and then when she's making bhel, but she's making it with cornflakes, and it's just such a gem of a film. And to me, it is a far truer representation of what love is than the flashy stuff that we're used to in Hindi cinema, right? Like, everyone deserves a love like Ashok and Ashima Ganguly have. So I think that would probably be my favorite NRI film.
I think that scene on the beach between the father and the son, when Tabu's wearing the sari with the sweater and
Yeah,
all of that
so
and saying take
sweet.
care. But that moment when the father and the son is on that and the waves are coming through,
Yeah.
it just rips your heart apart. Like, it's just I have no words to describe it.
It's a beautiful movie, and it's a beautiful book too. Like, everyone
Great.
should read The Namesake. So okay, I think that concludes this episode. Thank you so much for joining us, Vikas. This was quite a marathon episode. And then, Vikas, how can our viewers/listeners find you and listen to your podcast? Tell us.
Yes, I'm on the podcast is called Let's Talk Melbourne. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple, it's on all major platforms, and you can follow me on Instagram, Let's Talk Mel. And I would like to thank you for inviting me. This has been so much fun, and I'm always championing the two of you and Filmi Ladies wherever I can, because I've said it, so I won't say it again. It's always great to always look forward to listening to what you have to say, the insights you bring about. And I can't wait for your viewers to listen to you on my podcast, which will come out very soon as well. And please come back to my podcast. I'm always happy to have you. So thank you so much for having me.
Like I say to Amrita from Khandan, "Aao behan podcast ke leke." Like, I'll come on yours, you'll come on mine. We'll just keep like visiting each other like the Victorians did.
And someday, when we find our couch cushion change, we'll be like, we'll just come to Melbourne so we can talk Melbourne.
Yes.
Absolutely. You should come to Melbourne.
You can show us all the sites where Salam Namaste were shot, and you can wear your Saif Ali Khan Salam Namaste wardrobe for us.
Them, and that's literally outside my house. That bridge where they're singing "My Heart Goes," is literally outside my house. So you don't even have to go anywhere.
We can do an Instagram reel of you like lip syncing to my Dil Goes.
I need to work on
that
biceps,
song. Oh gosh.
biceps to be able to shoot that reel first.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Filmi Ladies. We had so much fun chatting with Vikas, and I hope you had fun as well. Do check out his podcast, and then we'll also post on our socials the link to the 2 episodes that Beth and I appeared on his podcast, where we talk about Feroz Khan and Rajiv Rai. And then please let us know what you think about NRI films. Which are your favorite NRI films? We will not judge you. You are totally allowed to say that you love DDLJ, because I low-key love DDLJ as well, because I like Shah Rukh Khan. So, it's okay. You can tell us what you love and you can tell us what you hate. And we'll see you next week. Bye.